thank you, everybody. I'd like to
Sorry.
reconvene our budget hearings. It's Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018, 7 o'clock. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and a quick moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you. Okay, this evening we will be looking at pupil personnel, special education, Department of Maintenance, Technology, and the Department of General Administration and Capital. At that point, we'll have an opportunity for the public to be heard and then a anticipated executive session. With that being said, pupil personnel and special ed. I have a feeling I'm going to be turning around, correct?
We should just start the meeting from back there.
Now I know why you wanted to change it.
But he's so generous, we gave you that seat. Here, Bill. I guess that's as bright as it is. It's got to warm up.
Okay. That's getting better.
Well, good evening. Thank you for giving me again an opportunity to present the budgets for the Department of Pupil Personnel and for special education. And I appreciate how hard you work and how much effort and time goes into really understanding these budgets. And mine is not unique in that. My budgets actually are fairly complex, so I appreciate the time and consideration tonight. As you know, everything that is basically in my budget is under the umbrella of IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Many of them are mandated services, and we're aware of how we can make those mandates be effective but also fiscally responsible. So that's an important part of what you're going to see tonight in terms of the budget. So I'd like to move forward just with some basic demographics for you. And before I do that, I want to talk about the initiatives through special education. They align with Mr. Smith's initiatives that he spoke about a few nights ago, but they're a little more granular in terms of really looking at special education and looking at the Department of Pupil Personnel. First of all, we want to continue to really look at our time with non-disabled peers, include our students as much as we can in meaningful education alongside their typical peers. We do that through co-teaching, which we have an emphasis on the last 2 years, and a lot of collaboration. As far as best practices and specialized instruction, we're always looking at ways to improve our practice, to close that gap educationally for our students through literacy and numeracy. And we also are looking very closely at the mental health needs. And we have a number of different initiatives and programs that we have included throughout the years, and I'll talk a little bit about those, as well as our need to move forward. In addition to that, it's looking at our families and really helping our families understand that and feel supported of their child's disability and know that the school system and the families work collaboratively hand in hand. And then finally, to always be looking at post-school, looking at how are we preparing our kids for life after high school, or if they're going to a transition program for 18 to 21-year-olds, how are we helping them and their families be most equipped for life after our school system ends. So this gives you an overview of the demographics of special education, and you can see by the graph it's pretty consistent over time. It's the last 5 years, and the percentage is, for example, the 12-13 one, 13.4. 13.4% of our students in our school district have an IEP, an individual education plan. So you can see that we are fairly consistent, although we have seen a slight increase just in the last 2 years. But when you compare us to the state, this is where I think it gets a little more interesting. You can see the state in red, and, you know, a number of years ago, we were significant, well, higher than them. And what's happened over time is that there's an increase in identification of students with disabilities across the state of Connecticut and the nation. I expect that that trend line, the red one, is going to continue to increase, and I think that we're holding steady, although there are some slight increases in special education. This is for our K-12 students. And I think it's important to even look at the prevalence rate within special education. If you look at the number of students that we have identified, you can see that the highest area of disability is a specific learning disability. Historically, it's always been that area. And now it includes dyslexia, which is a new classification of a reading disorder, literacy disorder. So that has been consistent, and these numbers are consistent with the state as well. The other area of concern or impact is the other health impaired, and other health impaired includes our ADHD students, and that area also, we have a lot of clinical issues, a lot of mood disorders, students with comorbid issues that might not be represented in that 136, but that's where a lot of our sometimes behavior issues arise with students because of maybe untreated ADHD or other areas of disability within that number. So when I showed you the numbers before, I didn't include our bookends. So our bookends are, first of all, our CEL preschool students, our 3- and 4-year-olds who have already been identified with needing special education. Their needs are significant, but they're in a stellar program because it's 50-50, 50 inclusion, typical peers, and then 50% students with disabilities. The board in 2016-17 was very, I think, supportive in terms of increasing a .5 teacher at Northville because, as you can see, our numbers went from 31 up to 48. So we definitely have a need there. We do see an increase in young students, young children being identified already with special education needs. So in the 2017-18, currently this year we have 42, but our referral process isn't over, and we don't oftentimes know what's going to happen in our preschools or what number of children are going to be coming through our doors in terms of needing to require special ed services. So on the other end of the bookend is our Litchfield Hills Transition Center. Again, a stellar program. It services our students who are 18 to 21 who are mandated to be provided with a program. It does keep our students in. In fact, we have a number of students that come from out-of-district placements back to Litchfield Hills for these remaining years. We do have a continuum of learning. You'll see our students out at Big Y, Joanne Fabrics, a multitude of different vocational sites within the community. And some of our students go on to full-time employment, some go to part-time, some just have independent living skills as part of their plan once they reach 21. We recently had a student of ours that came back from an out-of-district placement who just graduated from the Culinary Institute with our support. So there are a lot of individualized programs and plans in place for these young adults. We also do have a tuition student, and we've opened our doors somewhat to tuition students based on the availability that we have. But again, some years we actually have waiting lists of students coming in from other districts because of the program. So this gives you just an overview of staffing in the district. And you can see that our related services, psychologists, social workers, speech and language, and even our special ed teachers, the numbers have remained fairly consistent over time. We do adjust depending on needs. Let's say there are more students at the high school than there might be at one of the other schools, so we adjust. The one area, though, that the board has been very supportive in is the need for social worker. And so over the last 3 years, we've increased social workers by 2 full-time positions. The one area of need, again, is the department chair vacancies at Hill and Plain and Northville. They're still posted, but we haven't been able to find a candidate willing to work part-time. The other area of need is the special ed administration column. You can see that we have a full-time special ed supervisor at the high school, but all the other schools go unsupported. And I think that's important to note. We definitely didn't want to go to the board with an increase in the administrative section this year. It was on Mr. Smith's cutting room floor, but it is identified as an area of needed additional support. So Going on, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on out-of-district placements, because I know that that is, a concern for all of us, and I know a risk factor going forward with the budget. If you look at the number of students who are outplaced right now, historically, you can see that we're hovering right around in the 30s. This year, we have 39 students that are projected to be outplaced this year, and we can absorb them in our budget. We have the resources, the funding. Some students have moved back in, some students have moved back out. Next year, we're projected to have 42. Now, that is 42 known students, 42 placements that we know right now we're going to need ODP funding for. So this is where it gets a little more complicated, because as we had said, there are some things that we know about out-of-district placements, and then there are some things that we truly do not know. The unknowns, which make it a risk factor, is first of all new enrollments to the district. So we could have a family moving into New Milford, their child's already outplaced. We need to honor that outplacement. Unilateral placements, that's when a parent actually places their child in another school, a private school, and then through possible mediations or hearings, we come to a resolution in terms of funding and resources. So those are the unknowns, and those unknowns can sometimes really be big variables in terms of budgets. We had 5 mediations this year. Last year, we had 1. So it's a factor that we can't control. Tuition, these are the things that we do know. We know that tuition increases year to year. We usually use a figure of about 3% tuition increases. We do know that some of our students are graduating from a 4-year high school, and they'll be going on either to college or some other setting. We also know that some of our students age out of the programs, the private schools, so once they're 21, that following year, then we no longer service them. We know those things. And then a change of school placement. If we have a student that we know we can't really manage and educate, we're already planning and we're looking for next year for placements. And the reverse, if we know that a student is ready to come back, we're starting to work on that transition plan on how are we going to bring them back to district. So those are the things that do impact the tuition costs. Right now, we have projected for 42, the orange line. We know that 42 students most likely will be filling that, but we could be erring on the side of having 46 placements. We're not doing that. Our budget right now does not reflect that additional cost involved, so that is the risk. So this is a graph that is a little complicated, but it gives you an idea of what the costs are, because when I say 4 out-of-district placements or 2 or 7, it's really hard to just give a number, because really the cost variations between schools and placements and the complexity of the students vary to such a huge degree. So if you look at the range going down the left-hand column, those are the years, but going across are really the cost margins for a placement. We have had students in the past that have been $300,000 or more per placement. It includes related services, transportation, but very, very involved students. And then all the way down to greater than 64 or less than 64,000. And the reason we use that number is that is our threshold number for excess cost. And excess cost, anyone above 64,000 is available for the excess cost reimbursement. Any placement below 64,000 is not. What?
That's the 4.5%.
Correct. Correct.
So this is the actual cost of the district. That does not include any additional state, money coming from the state.
Correct. Correct. And if you look at the any placement over 300,000 or even 200,000, you can see that in the last, 2 to 3 years, we have not had as many high-cost placements. And that's a good thing, because I think we're doing an excellent job, but it also means that our excess cost reimbursement is less because we're spending less on those placements. Okay. So if you look at us compared to the state, and this is where it is a little enlightening, you look at the New Milford Public Schools percentage of students in special education that we place out of district. So you can see we're hovering 3-4% per year. 3 to 4% of our students, K-12 with an IEP, are placed out. Whereas the state of Connecticut, 6, 7.4, 8.4, 8.4, you can see a significant rise in the number of students that have been placed out. I think this, there are a number of factors. I think we, yeah, a number, well, again, a number of factors, but I think that we do an excellent job programming. I think programs like ESS, like some of our autistic classrooms, like just the collaboration and the co-teaching, all the things that make up really a differentiated continuum of services for our students keeps our kids in our district, which is what we want. But there are times when, due to safety, due to complexities, due to a number of factors, we need to place them out, or parents feel that they want to place their child out. But it's something to be proud of, but it's also something that could change. It could very well change for next year, it could change the year after. I think we've been fairly consistent, but again, I see an increase, significant increase in the state. Okay, so these are some of the demands and unfunded mandates I just want you to be aware of. We talked about public and private tuition lines. The complexity and the needs of the very young. We have children now in kindergarten, first grade with significant mental health challenges already that we're trying to program for. They're complex. We do have increase in the number of planning and placement team meetings. Those are called PPTs. And actually, I'll show you the graph for that right now. This is the historically the number of PPTs that our staff have been able to complete. And PPTs are a wonderful forum for making change and working collaboratively, but it also takes resources as far as staffing, administrators, and just time of our staff, along with all the additional paperwork. So you can see there's about a 200 increase in the last 4 years of the number of PPTs that our staff have either requested or families have requested. So going back to the planning and placement, the rigorous academic curriculum, hearing from Mr. Corpo, our curriculum is changing. We are adding more rigor, we're adding more data, we're expected to close that gap for our students. But that is an increased demand also on our staff and our programming. Lastly, we have some mandated legislation. Independent educational evaluations. If a parent requested, a parent can go out and have an independent evaluation completed on their child. Typically, we honor that. We work with the families, but evaluations can go anywhere from $1,500 to $4,000 per evaluation. Last year we did 26. This year we're inching near 40. So it varies each year. Also, dyslexia legislation. We're now under IDEA. We need to identify students who have reading or literacy disorders, and we also need to plan and program and teach them appropriately with research-based interventions. So that's fairly new. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some good results. This is our ESS report card. This is our therapeutic program at the high school. This is year 2. So this is their report card from the first marking period. You can see that absences continue to decrease. This is pre and post ESS or pre-ESS and current. And then also the grade point averages continue to increase. And I will say ESS is a very effective program, but I also believe that it's the collaboration with the high school staff, the special ed staff at the high school, and all of them working together, and I see it day in and day out. The students all get, they get one group session a day, and they get individual sessions. In addition to that, over 230 urgent sessions have been filled for our students. So at any point, they can go to ESS and they can, maybe de-stress, they can talk, but they re-enter the classroom and they get back to class. So that's a huge number for just this point in the year. So the kids are feeling that they can go there and they can get what they need and then move on with their day. In addition, we have 5 students who successfully discharged this past year. That is a huge success because those students are, 3 of them I think are graduating with their peers with the right amount of credits, and it's due to, I believe a huge part of it is due to this program.
Discharging, you mean they're no longer part of
They're no longer part of,
Integrated back into the high school setting.
yeah. And some might need it all 4 years, but the fact is 5 of them are on their way and no longer need that therapeutic intervention during their day. And I just want to review real quickly about mental health, because as we all know, there's growing needs across the nation. And again, the 2 social workers were a definite asset and continue to be an asset for the school system. Our ESS program, which you also supported. Parents as Partners, we continue to offer workshops throughout the year. Our mental health forum, we bring in lectures, workshops, and we have that for our related service staff so they can go back out into the community and back into the school and share that information. We're part of a crisis team for our whole region, the PBIS implementation, which Mr. Corporal talked about earlier. We have our full-time substance abuse counselor, and also this year, for the first time, a full-time BCBA. So all of those people work sometimes collaboratively, sometimes within the buildings, but we do have a fairly strong safety net of mental health supports for our students. Accomplishments, that was one of them. But I also want to just, again, reiterate, and I did this last year, CDAC comes in and they do this big report October 1st, and they take a snapshot of all the things that we're doing wrong, and then we have to fix them. And so there are over 81 areas in an IEP that we can be cited for, and we had 0 citations this year. So again, you know, compliments to whoever's behind me, and compliments to all the people that work really hard in our district, just really making sure that our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. Our annual performance rating, I keep hoping we're going to get our next 2017, but everything is looking fairly good. We met our target for all our early childhood indicators. I think we have for the past 7 or 8 years. Our programs are top-notch. We also are eliminating our overrepresentation. If we overrepresent, let's say, a certain area of disability or an ethnicity, we have to go and explain to the state why we do those things or why it happened and correct it. We didn't have any this year. We also met all our established timelines for reevals and for eligibility PPTs, which is significant. And we're decreasing our out-of-school suspension rates, and we met our target time for time with non-disabled peers, and that's what it looks like. So our goal is to get our kids into the classroom 79 to 100%, and for the first time in 5 years, we met our goal of 68.1. And that's it. So I'm sure you have some questions, and I appreciate your time.
Okay, we'll start with on the presentation. Tammy?
Laura, thank you very much. It was a great presentation. I, for one, see the value of what we do here in our district, having a special needs child, and I'm very appreciative for what you do and for what all the staff does for our kids. It's pretty remarkable.
Thank you.
I am struggling with the 42-46 discrepancy. I'm very worried that if we budget for 42, knowing that that is our placement at this time, and then we end up with 46 or more, can we absorb that in our budget? And if we do you have a plan of where we're going to absorb that in our budget, rather than getting ahead of it?
Well, I don't know if we can absorb it, but again, I'm hesitant to talk about numbers as much as I am about costs, because I think we've been very good about looking for ways to place students, if we need to, in schools that are reasonable.
And that's my biggest concern, is that I wouldn't want to see us not place somebody who's borderline or should be placed because we're worried about this. And knowing what towns like Ridgefield, and I know they're a circumstance that's probably far excessive, but that now they've got to go back to the town for money because they just can't find it in their budget to be able to address these costs. So that's just,
I can weigh in a little bit on that because I think, Mr. Giovanone and Mrs. Olson and myself look at this a lot, especially when you look at some of the surrounding districts. And historically, we've never had to, I shouldn't say never. In the recent past, we haven't had to look to accounts other than the special ed department to ever offset. And I can say, at least in the time that I've worked with Mrs. Olson, we've never talked about a placement for a child and weighed the cost versus the need. We start with what does the child need and where's the best place. We start with the best place for the child in 97% of the cases is here. And what can we do to build programs to keep kids here? And we've been very successful at that. And when we're not successful, or when that doesn't work, we're not hesitant to go look and work with the family as to where a good placement would be. It is a moving target, and as Mrs. Olson pointed out, an outplacement of a student could be 64,000 or 200,000. You know, we think it's, we don't think it's fiscally responsible for us to put kind of a placeholder in the budget for any contingency. Because I think, pick a number, 500,000, 2 million, I mean, you could put any number in there, and I think there's a scenario that you could read the paper for and find a way where it's not enough. I think we've done a pretty good job of being conservative in our estimates, and the number of 42, and we went through this, you know, a couple different ways, it's not really about a number, because that 42, we know who those students are, we have some anticipated pieces in there.
And anticipated costs.
Will they manifest, will those costs be the same? And when we went through the financial cuts to the town and said, do we build in costs that we don't think or don't know, or based on historics, when you look at our trend, you know, we've really looked, I think the year where we had the most, and I think it's even on one of the slides, I don't know if you can pull it back up, the difference between what we anticipated and what happened, I think, was 7 more one year. And in other years, it was 3. And in both of those cases, we absorbed the cost. Again, that cost, I can't tell you, is 50,000 a student or 100,000 a student. And so, keep going, it was the historics.
So if that was 50,000 a student, 50 times 7 is a considerable amount of money when we consider
That's right.
how tight our budget is and how very little wiggle room that we have.
That's right, and so and this is when you read the paper, whether it's Brookfield or New Fairfield or Ridgefield is probably the extreme right now. Even if you build some in and it's tight, and even if you freeze the budget, there are scenarios where students move in with high demands for support that you can't absorb. And I don't think it'd be responsible, based on our historic trend, to build a budget, especially in this year where there's such a cut to staff, to say we're going to cut more staff or we're going to cut programs to be even more conservative. I think the risk that we're taking is, again, we watch that on a daily basis, sometimes hourly basis. We have done a good job working with families, and that's where we're going to put our emphasis, and then adjust kind of as that goes forward. If we start seeing pressures develop that we can't anticipate, then we're going to have a conversation, but then it'll be known. Then we can say, we're 100,000 short because of X, Y, Z, and here are some ways to get there. But to do that now and cut more programs or more staff, we didn't feel was a responsible way to budget.
I understand and fully agree with you. I just wanted to make sure there's a plan.
Yes.
That if we were to absorb more kids, that there's a plan. And it seems like you do have a plan.
Thank you.
Angie?
Oh, Brian had his hand up first.
It's okay, go ahead, Angie.
I'm sorry.
This may already be answered somewhere, you just direct me to it if it is. Page 4, you have the nice little chart, which I appreciate. Do we have somewhere a list of the number of students served at each school?
Page 4. No, I don't have that, but I can get that.
Okay, that would be great. I have a couple. Can I ask them all, or?
Sure.
Flip back to Brian. So on page 7, it's the number of planning and placement team meetings. So this, or the last, just to say last, year 16, 17, we had 1499. Are those individual, I mean, is that unique students, or some students could be more than one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Some students that are placed with us diagnostically, we're not sure if they're going to be eligible. We have PPTs every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So, and some of our high-risk students, we have PPTs very frequently. So,
And then my last question, can you just remind me how many students are in the ESS program?
ESS, we have a cap of 18. Right now, we have, with some new referrals, we have 17, so we have one opening
Okay. Thank you.
today.
Brian?
On page, on the third slide, the second page, those are all our students with IEPs. Do you have the number for students with 504 plans?
I don't, but we can get it.
I'm just curious. You don't have to.
And 504s come out of regular ed, right?
Yeah.
504s come out of regular ed, right?
Department of Instruction.
Yeah, okay. So, and then I had one other question. I know the ESS program is been very successful, and I know there was some talk about starting an ESS-like program in the middle school. Is that in the talks for the future? I mean, obviously in this budget it is.
I would love one in every building. There's no immediate talk about it, but, I think that the earlier the intervention with the mental health needs, the more successful we're going to be with our kids over time. There have been a few different districts in the area that have actually started ESS at the K-2 level to meet the needs of those early mental health issues that we're starting to see bubble up.
Eileen?
Just had a question, I'll say it slowly. Participation in the Parents as Partners program. Is it good? Is it mandatory?
No, it's not mandatory. In fact, if you look around the buildings, you'll see signs. We have Dr. Heather Flynn coming from an agency talking about executive function and how that impacts our kids at home. And we've had people come and talk about different mental health issues. One speaker we had come and talk about anxiety and how anxiety affects all of our children to some degree, and the turnout was huge. So it depends sometimes on the topic. It also depends on the weather. It is at night. We do offer childcare. We're trying to accommodate and get as many families out as we can.
So you're satisfied basically with the participation of the parents?
Yeah, I mean, we always want more. We try and advertise a lot.
How is it advertised?
Through the paper, the website, signs.
Emails.
Yeah, Twitter.
Twitter.
Parents get
Parents as Partners. It's coming up next Tuesday
Okay, thank you.
or Monday.
Monday.
Okay. JT?
I was coming last night, then I heard it was canceled.
JT?
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Mrs. Olson. Great presentation here. One thing I think that's really a tremendous accomplishment, having been, in the district for a number of years before my current sentence here on the board. I know time spent with non-disabled peers. I mean, you played it back 5 years, but I know we've always struggled with that. So I think that's accommodations to special ed to be able to, meet that target of 68, and again,
Hopefully
putting that
continue.
goal there too. So that's admirable, because I know many years previous, the state had cited us for
Right,
those types of
right,
things. So
right.
I think that's very admirable to get our special ed population with our mainstream population. I had a question about the kind of protections in the sense that out-of-district placements. I know as a board and as a district, we can't necessarily contract for following year services, but what assurances do we have, let's say, with out-of-district placements, with some of these facilities, residential facilities or other schools that we're sending students to? What assurances do we have that contractually we might, you said 3% increase we kind of budget for, but do we have any kind of assurances or options, if, let's say, that gets budget busted, right? So let's say placement's going to be X amount of money, but then it doubles. What do we have as a fallback for that, or are we just kind of stuck with that bill?
Well, we always project ahead. We call and we find out what their anticipated increase is going to be, and that's how we develop this budget, even based on those needs. There have been times when some schools have had 0% increase, other times when it's been 4%. So I think for the most part, they're reasonable. They want to work with the school districts.
Sure.
They want to be able to build relationships. And one thing for me is that they want to be able to work with us on transitioning them back. Because, it shouldn't be a long-term placement. It should be an opportunity to bring them back to their community. And we have a lot of good programs here, but we want to make sure when we bring them back, we can meet their needs,
Right.
and they're safe, and our staff and students are safe.
I was just wondering too, like at the state level too, like what kind of protections there could be for that, because I got to think other districts wrestle with that, and let's say, a placement, tuition changes by an X amount of money. I mean,
I've never seen that.
Okay.
They are accredited. We can only send students to state-approved accredited
Okay.
private and public schools. So they do have criteria, but I don't know what their criteria is in terms of cost. I've never seen anything jump exponentially in tuition from year to year.
Okay.
I think for the most part, almost, I mean, with a few exceptions, like if a student moved in from out of state and they were already placed out of state, but for the ones that we work with, again, they work with public schools in Connecticut. They understand the relationship, and Mrs. Olson, if you came to us and said, we're giving you a 50% increase, that would severely handicap our ability to continue to work with them. So it hasn't happened, but I think the short answer is, unless there's some, I agree with Mrs. Olson, I don't know the accreditation process for some of the facilities, but those are some, back to,
The risk and
it's back there,
uncertainty.
there's certain
piece,
risk
right.
and uncertainty, yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Okay.
Quick question.
Bill?
Independent education evaluation. How does that work in the sense of, is it done automatically? Is it done at the parent's request? Is it done somewhere along the process where the behavior becomes, or the learning is effective?
All of the above.
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't say typically. There are times when we need more information on a student, and we will say at a PPT or at a we need to go to an independent evaluation. We need more information on why we're struggling with this child or why this child is struggling. So we will do that. And then there are times when a parent might disagree with the evaluation that we've completed on our end, and then they'll request an independent evaluation. I always strive for it to be mutually agreed upon. I strive for it to be an evaluator who we can work with, someone who will actually send us reports, someone who's cost effective. We have criteria that they have to follow too. So we do see an increase. I see an increase in it this year, but again, it's one of those kind of up and down year to year. But they do have that right. Parents do have that right to request it.
My question goes around, but when does that right kick in? I mean, is it the first PPT they go to?
It
They
could-
can
It could be.
request it?
It could be.
All right.
But we have our right to do our due diligence to complete our evaluations first. So if we exhausted all of our evaluations and they still disagree, then it would
Okay,
be
that's-
an IEE.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, at this point, I would ask any of you if you have any questions on, excuse me, the overview, which is found on page 44 through page 47. Any questions on the overview? We can come back to it if you'd like as well. Okay, on page 48, staffing and operating expenses.
I had a quick question.
Wendy?
I think I did. Maybe it's a different page. Sorry, you're good.
Page 49. Tammy?
Yeah, Laura, the 54320, that is the AED? Is that 655% due to the AED?
It is.
What are those devices? Like, what are the?
So I'm glad you
examples of
asked that.
devices?
Those are the defibrillators.
Oh,
And
okay.
actually, automated external defibrillators. We have 11 in the district, and they've reached their shelf life. And so when they reach their shelf life, we have to replace them. We need 11. They're $1,695 apiece. We purchased them in 2016. Like I said, the shelf life is about 10 years, and we do have in the high school budget. Pardon?
2006.
2006, you said 16.
Oh, six, oh, I'm sorry, 6.
I was gonna say, that's a good 10 years, boy, I like that.
Planning ahead. No, but the high school through the athletic department, they do have one in their athletic budget as well for the athletic wing at the high school. So it doesn't happen often, again, once every 10 years, but,
And they're all replaced at the same time, that's a bummer.
yeah, well, they were bought at the same time.
Yeah, okay.
And page 50. And 51. Page 52. Have I found you yet?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm reading this incorrectly. Under staffing changes, it indicates 1. Where's the staffing change?
Yeah, I think it was in his table.
Are you on page 52?
52.
Page 52.
Is that just a typo?
Yes, it is.
Okay, just checking.
Those are the questions we
Sorry.
like.
Right
Good
there.
Sorry, you
question.
guys.
Those are the answers we like. There we go.
Typo.
See, resolved already.
And 53. Mr. Dahl, I can't see you, so you're gonna have to send up a flare, okay?
I'll let you know.
All right.
Just
He's sitting as far away.
And that's why JT switched with you.
Yeah, that's right.
Page 54.
53. Going back to that,
53,
there,
Eileen has 53.
Mrs. Olson, the grant coverages, there's no percentage of that's being covered, staff percentage being changed at all.
Not at all.
Okay, so that remains the same.
Status quo.
Great. Because in the workshop that the board did in May of 2017, you did a really good overview of breaking down a lot of those components. So it's really good. I think the board might want to go back and take a look at that. It's really helpful for us.
And we're gonna go back to page 53.
Just
Eileen?
51115, certified teacher salary, it's down 100%. That part-time teacher that we're losing, or?
Is that in ESC 10011?
One, two, it's the one, actually, it's the one that we worked on earlier today, and Anthony, do you wanna?
Sure, that's for the ESY teachers, the additional hours, and we've reclassified those in the budget to their actual locations. That's 2 teachers.
Okay, so that's just hours, that's not.
That's additional extended school year summer hours for that. And we're looking to do a new cost center as we move into the 18-19 budget to capture that a little better.
Okay.
JT?
I don't know, maybe I missed this, Laura, but ESS, where does that then live within the operating budget? You know?
That's within the Department of Pupil Personnel.
Okay. Sorry, let's go right back. Now, is that a flat cost? Because I know the startup cost was $275, right?
Right, and so no, I think it's 282.
Okay, so that's, and
But
then,
it's-
I'm
they
just
didn't
curious where
increase
that
it
is.
last year, this year they did.
So is that rolled then into
It's in the professional services line?
purchase services, pupil
53200.
services?
Yep, yep.
So it's within that 800,000, 88 there, right? Okay, and you said it was 280,
Yeah.
282,000 or so? I don't know
I
if
can
that's-
get the exact amount. if you-
Okay, is it in the supplemental?
The exact dollar amount is it's in that 280.
It's $280,500.
Okay. And is that, just a clarification then, that's, so when ESS comes into a district, that is their cost, and then that's 18 seats essentially that you can use, right, for that set cost?
Right, for
Okay.
2 clinicians in the services.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. And page 54. And 55. 55?
56.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sharing a book, give me a break.
I'm sorry?
Make sure you make those page numbers like 15.5.
Mine is on 56, sorry.
I have a question on 55.
Brian?
The non-certified salary, the 221% increase, just curious. And I'm probably looking in the wrong spot now that I think about it. That's
Yeah,
the
what
issue.
that was a transfer of 2 para-educators. We didn't increase the total number of paras, but because of the burst in population there, we moved staff over there to support the students.
Okay, thank you.
And 56. Wendy?
A basic question on the special education transportation. Do we get any reimbursement at all?
So
How does that work?
basically,
Transportation piece wise, you know, go.
when you look at the total cost
Yes.
to educate the child,
Yes?
that we can embed transportation costs to get to that $64,000
That is
calculation.
part, okay.
And then, again, that 64,000 is our deductible. We get 0 till we hit 64,000.
That's right.
And then anything over 64,000, we budgeted a 70% reimbursement.
But the transportation is part of that formula.
Any expense connected to educating
Got
that
it, I just
child.
want to make sure that's
Exactly.
clear.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And page 57. Okay, thank you. And
You said we could go back.
you can go back. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question, on 46, it says, this budget reflects 6 social workers, and the last line, it says, this department also includes 1 substance abuse counselor. So is that a total of 7 counselors,
The
or?
substance abuse counselor is not the same certification. It's actually a special certification for a licensed substance abuse counselor, so we separated it.
Okay, so, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See you.
And now, we'll move on to the Department of Maintenance and Technology. I haven't here the same. Yes.
Pictures I like.
You know you like pictures. I draw the paper, identical.
Yeah, that's your first. You had no, you were not impacting me at all.
I guess so.
I said I'm just making loops, it's not really art.
All it would have taken would have been one little Suite 504 draft. How many did you get?
Okay, technology? No? You're going facilities first. Okay, I've got it backwards up here.
That's all right.
That's why I'm getting the blank stares. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to present the facilities management budget for 2018 and 19. In the presentation this evening, I'd like to cover the following topics. Each is important as to how and why we came to the proposed budget that you have in front of you. And I'd like to begin with our goal. It's pretty simple. Keep the schools open and running as efficiently as possible. Properly clean and maintain schools make the learning experience better and easier for our students. Limiting the interruptions to the classroom, whether for mechanical failures or snow-related events, is of paramount importance to our department. But how do we accomplish this? Simply put, it's by having the ability to purchase the consumable products and durable goods which are used in the buildings every day. It could be anything from toilet paper, hand soap, light bulbs. Just look around you, there's a million things that we have to purchase day in and day out. Being able to supply and repair our buildings is critical to the students in the buildings. The past several months at Facilities Subcommittee, we've been talking extensively about budget drivers. These are topics which came to our attention after February of 2017, which in turn means they are directly impacting our current fiscal year budget, as well as the 18-19 budget here tonight. Hurricanes in the southern part of the country impacted us significantly. They drove up oil prices for shipping costs and for the production of oil-based products, such as trash bags. Those costs were directly passed on to us. Fire hydrant project we spoke about in the beginning of the winter. In conjunction with the town fire marshal, we had to launch an initiative to start testing and maintaining all fire hydrants owned by the district. Those results were received right before the holidays, and we are currently working towards getting proposals to remedy those deficiencies. AHERA compliance stands for Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act, and in June of 2017, we were audited by the State Department. During the audit, we received some insight as to how we can improve following the AHERA guidelines. We perform well in certain areas, such as record keeping and training of staff members, but we found out ways that we can improve overall by increasing the frequency of our tests and abatement projects. That is also reflected in the budget tonight. Playground compliance. In October, we conducted an assessment of all the K-3 school playgrounds. The report gave us insight as to the age, condition, depth of the safety fiber, and a number of remedies to go forward, and we built those costs in here as well. Back in 17-18, we requested to transfer funds out of the overtime budget to offset costs in the supply and custodial maintenance lines. The request went through, but unfortunately, due to budget constraints, some of those funds were lost. The budget tonight attempts to recapture some of those funds, but not all of them. And lastly, in the back of the book, jumping ahead a little bit, you're going to notice that there's a line for the 5-year sprinkler tests in the capital plan. Those are mandatory state-required tests for all of our sprinkler systems. They have to be done every 5 years. We anticipate needing to replace valves, flow switches, and miscellaneous other sprinkler system parts. Before we get into the 5-year plan entirely, we want to take a look at the operating budgets. Custodial operating budget is on 61 and 62 of the book, and I've highlighted some of the lines here, in particular 54310, 54301, and 56290. The increases to the smaller schools, you can see them at the top of the slide, are to make an attempt to realign the budgets on a building-to-building basis. We needed to realign these funds in order to get a more accurate depiction of what it costs to run each school within each line. If you could just look over to the 16-17 budget, you would see $0 allocated for building maintenance. That doesn't mean we weren't maintaining Sarah Noble or Hill and Plain. All the funds were previously lumped into a general district-wide account. So as we progress through the years, we're starting to fine-tune those numbers and figure out exactly what it costs every year to maintain the different schools. Let's see. Jumping, you also with the custodial, I'd like to point out the corresponding decreases to the high school lines. Those lines were overfunded, so there's a corresponding offset. So you'll see a lot of negative percentages for the high school lines, the last 3 lines on this slide.
I'm sorry, but that was due to what, Kevin?
So essentially, the high school was getting the lion's share of the funding, and then what we're doing is we're breaking it out to the smaller schools. So you're seeing a decrease in the high school, but a corresponding increase to the smaller schools. Moving ahead to maintenance operating budget. Similarly to what we saw on the custodial side of the house, there's a reallocation of funds to evenly budget for the smaller versus larger schools. And I think we've done that here tonight, and we've also captured those budget drivers we talked about on the previous slides and in the previous meetings. I just want to actually take this quick opportunity to thank Anthony and his team over in the budget office, because what you don't see with all of these line item moves is a lot of effort on his team's part, and there was a lot of behind-the-scenes movement that had to make this happen, and I appreciate all the efforts of his staff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. To give you an idea of what we're talking about when we're moving money around, I actually took a few photos to try and give you a better understanding. Right here we have Northville. This is the boiler room, probably a room not many people have seen, but it does illustrate our points here. Photo on the left is 6 of the 8 circulator pumps needed to heat the building. It's kind of tough to see, but the middle pump on the left photo is the newest pump. We replaced that in November. That one pump costs approximately $2,000. There's 8 pumps in the building. So the 2 pumps on the right are showing their age and that they are past their useful life expectancy. Now, while we would like to, in an ideal world, change all 3 in 1 year, that would take up nearly 60% of the entire maintenance budget for Northville for the entire year. So what we do is we try and allocate these funds and conduct our needs assessment to find out where this money needs to go. Moving along, we now have the Scotticoke hot water heater. We talked about this in the fall as well. The photo on the left was the old unit, which failed on us and had to be replaced very quickly. Photo on the right is the new unit after it went in. This one unit cost $10,000, just under $10,000, and that was almost 65% of the current year budget for that one building. So there was no way to fund this without transferring money into the Scotticoke supply line for maintenance. But just to give you a sense of what this stuff costs and how much we have to deal with, I figured these photos might help illustrate those points. Similarly, we have work going on at the high school. This is an air handler. This is kind of similar to what you have in your house if you have central air conditioning, just much bigger. That unit services the second floor west side of the building, and that motor that you see in the right photo is about 500 pounds. That was replaced last year at a cost of nearly $3,000. Now, to put that in context, we have 14 of these in the high school. So in the past, and I'm actually pretty proud of this, and the guys that do all this literally heavy lifting, we replaced 8 of the 14 motors in the past 2 years. So this budget would help keep that on cycle. Moving on. In the Lillis building, the condensation tank was replaced after many years of being in disrepair. And I wanted to illustrate this in the hot water heater, even though, once again, we talked about it in previous meetings. This budget does something differently. We're actually allocating funds for custodial and maintenance supplies directly to Lillis where they hadn't existed before. You can see by the zeros there, for the past 3 years, we had no money allocated. And what we had to do in order to pay for these projects is take it out of a Northville or the high school and so on and so forth. So we actually are budgeting line items now for Lillis. Skipping ahead to the capital reserve projects. Last week during Mr. Smith's superintendent budget presentation, he referred to the 5-year capital plan and our need to place items in the operating budget. We need to reduce the strain on the capital reserve account. The capital reserve account is a fantastic tool for us, but we need to be able to use it for unexpected problems or large-scale planned projects in the future. We replaced the rooftop unit here at Sarah Noble in October. That was an example of one that we didn't anticipate having to do, but at a $40,000 repair, that capital reserve account came in very useful. We recently completed the Northville fire alarm project. This was part of our presentation last year. We allocated funds through the capital 5-year plan, and the project was started in December of this year. Essentially, the system was original to the building. We could not replace devices any longer because of their age and the wear and tear, and the whole entire system had to be replaced. So by way of comparison, we have now a fully addressable fire alarm system for the kids at Northville. That system is not only fully addressable, but is up to all the current code requirements. So that system will service that building for years to come. And last but not least, I would like to point out, I believe it's line 20 in the capital 5-year plan. That is the oil tank. It actually reads septic tank, which is a typo in the budget book. That is the fuel oil tank at Scotticoke. It was replaced in 1993, as you can see in these photos, and by law, it has to be replaced every 30 years. I know it's hard to believe that 1993 is 25 years ago, but we need to start planning ahead for this type of project. It could cost anywhere up to and including $450,000 to replace this one particular tank. So with that in mind, I want to stress the importance of maintaining and funding the capital reserve account for these large-scale projects in the future. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Any general questions on the presentation? Joe? And then Tammy?
With regard, and I don't see it here directly, but with regard to the cleaning supplies that we use throughout the district and all our schools, what is our effort to go or use green supplies
for a more environmental friendly cleaning product?
We actually have a policy in place mandated by the state of Connecticut to supply and use green cleaning products in all our schools.
Good, thanks.
You're welcome.
Tammy?
When we replaced some of the items, the equipment, did we pay labor, or do we have staff that actually, did that cost include the labor, or did we have staff that could do the labor?
That's a great question. The Northville heating pumps, we actually did that in-house at a terrific cost savings.
I would say your labor is
That's right.
hugely expensive.
The Northville fire alarm device project, that was actually part of the scope of work in the contract, was to have the electricians come in and wire them.
Okay.
It all depends on the project.
On the project, but some of it we were able to keep costs
Absolutely.
low by doing the work ourselves.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, and in our budget books on page 58.
Is all of this open for discussion, including the capital portion? Or are you just going through, because it's listed on here? I mean, not.
Oh, I see what you're saying, the 5-year capital plan.
Well, I can wait till capital, it's fine. I can wait, it's fine.
59. $60.
Oh, I have a question on 60. I think there's another typo. It's actually a budget change of -1. Goes from 15 to 14. Do the groundskeeper.
That should be the same 5.5 in 17-18, I'm pretty sure.
All right, so 4.5 is incorrect.
I will double check that.
Anthony, we reduced the HVAC
That's
position as
right.
part of the budget cuts last year. So that may be right, but was the HVAC, we'll look into that. and
The
get it cleared up.
HVAC was part of the first tier cut in the last June
Right.
budget
Yeah,
cut.
I think it's a straight typo, I'll double check. The 17-18 budget does not have an HVAC in there,
That's what it, yeah,
but I will double check.
Thank you.
because that position was eliminated.
Yes.
And page 61.
I just have a question on this, so this question is really for anyone who's looking at our budget, as well for board members. If you look at the 16-17, to start off with Hill and Plain, line 1, for example, 16-17 budget, then actual, you're gonna see those numbers jump. We're doing that because of the realignment, is that it? So when someone's looking at our budget and they see a 0 in 16 to 17, and then they go to 18-19 and see 200,000 and think we're up 200,000, that is not the case.
So in the past, and this is true of a lot of.
It's
these-
true of the line
absolutely,
items,
it's a
because
good-
this question came up last
Yes.
night, and I think for the public, it would be good for them
It's a
to
good
know
question.
that we've had some realignment.
So to align that, if you're looking for the 16-17 actuals, and you're not seeing there at Hill and Plain, if you flip to page 62, and you look in BFY 26143, the 5124, there are all the actuals, the
Right.
$1.7 million
But-
for all of the
Yeah.
receipts.
But to your,
Yeah, I think to clarify things, we made it so that we can keep track of each building separately for their maintenance costs, whereas in the past, we have not done that.
but if you're seeing a 0 line item, it is not
Right,
necessarily,
and
and
that's-
most likely not a 0 line item, that it's been reallocated, and you're to look for that
So
area.
that we
in the
can
budget.
track-
I just want to make that clear.
Track our expenses for efficiencies, or not efficiencies.
Well, and that's where I would say that if you look at the first couple of pages, really,
Right.
and this is true of any
Any.
of the location codes or departments, those first couple of pages where you look at total amount of staff, total amount of custodial operating expenses on page 59, and you get the non-certified salaries, that's it rolled up. So that's where if there's a change in staff and salaries that isn't about a real allocation, that's where you'd see that. When you get to the specific buildings, you're exactly right, is that those shifts And that's true of special ed, it was true of that ESY
Right, we've had several,
extended school
yes.
year. Like, that's where those ins and outs, and that's where those cover pages kind of give you the overall picture of each of the locations.
And if I'm not mistaken, we had that last year as well when we were reprioritizing and recategorizing many of the items.
And I think it's interesting, now that we're moving further away from the AS 400 and we're living in kind of the newer system, and you have conversations of what do you want to track? If you want to know what it costs to run Hill and Plain, well, we have to migrate, and it's difficult to do all at once, and so it's a lot of smaller kind of checks as we go through the process. And then what's happening this year is we're doing that like through the operations subcommittee and the budget position statements and transfers, but when you go budget to budget, it kind of captures everything as that wasn't in last year's budget. So that's a good point when you read through the budget book.
And 62? And 63? And 64? And 65? Joe?
With regard to gasoline maintenance, do we continue to work with the town for pricing in a combination here?
That's exactly right.
And we're getting a bulk price
That's correct.
on our gasoline? The next question would be the next line down, facility supplies. A $6,000 increase.
Which line?
BFY 26243, 56292.
That's right. So that ties directly into
Oh,
those.
I'm sorry, I'm off by one. Yeah, it's 56290, I'm sorry.
Right. So that $6,000 increase is for those budget drivers that we spoke about, whether it's a HERA compliance to work on our asbestos testing throughout the district, abatement projects. That's what
Okay.
that's for.
More.
Eileen?
The central office, 56220, the electricity is up a lot.
I'm going to defer to Anthony as he works with the town pretty closely on those utility bills.
That's consolidation of the central office and facilities for the barn. So
Okay.
overall, that electricity is going up in that one location, and I'll give you the lines for the offset.
Okay, so that's two locations we're talking about for that line.
Correct.
Okay. So that had been merged. Okay.
Had it always been that way, or they've been separated? Had the barn always been with central office?
So I would say, kind of the historical, if you look at the actuals,
Uh-huh.
you can see that the actual in 16-17 was 16,000. And the budget for 17-18 didn't correct for that.
Okay.
And so we only budgeted 5,500 in this year. And so in next year's budget, we're correcting
Got it.
for the actuals. We can tie up the line and have correspondence.
All right, well, thank you.
Can I go back to just one
Sure.
thing real quickly? It's on page 59. I'm looking at the custodians per school, and they're pretty much, HPS, NES both have 4. Why is it that Sarah Noble has 2 more than Scotticoke when there's a higher population at Scotticoke than Sarah Noble's, because the school's bigger?
It's the square footage of the building.
Thank you. It's a messier though.
Joe?
Are you going to go to Capitol? Page 70?
In just a moment.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the pictures. That'd make a great physics project to watch how some of that works. Yes, then we'll entertain capital. Okay. We'll start off with specifics. Well, we'll do that.
What page is that?
Page 7.
Page 70, I'm sorry. Joe, go right
So we're
ahead.
looking at, did we look at, right,
No, it's on page 70.
Page 70.
yeah.
Jump that.
I have a couple
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah,
but
go
I'm
ahead.
more than glad to share. The alarm system upgrade that we're seeing this every year, now we're going 42, 55,000. This is what you were just discussing about the fire alarm system upgrade?
That's right,
To come up, is this to come up to code?
That's right.
Okay. I'm gonna bring up another general question. You did throw me with the word septic tank system, change. With an expense as grand as the oil tank replacement would be, and I know we're a few years out now, do we have a discussion with the town about bonding a project like that, given its significant cost? And you're estimating it 2022. I guarantee you that cost is gonna be significantly higher.
I'll take that question. With bonding and financials and things like that, that's part of discussions that we have with the mayor's office. We have gone over the 5-year capital plan with the mayor's office and expect to review that again with them.
That's a good thing, because I think it's asking a lot of us as a district
Right.
to
and
pick up
that's-
something of that size, and that's why we have bonding on the council side.
Right, and
And on the
that's,
town side for these enormous expenses.
those are all very worthy options, you're correct. You're correct.
Good, thank you.
But I want to assure you that we do have ongoing conversations.
It is.
Right now, it's dealing with other issues, shall we say, and then hopefully, but I can assure you they do have a copy of our plan.
It's a food for thought down the line. I know
Absolutely.
we're a couple years ahead of schedule here.
Absolutely.
That's what the town exists for.
Yep. And Wendy?
Okay, so the capital plan, it's a 165 split, is that it? Is that, how are we doing this with capital and technology and facilities?
I'd have to double check the math on that. I don't know if Anthony has a spreadsheet up, but,
No, it's the first
But-
page of the facility report.
oh, good, thank you.
157, 350 for facilities.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Okay, so it's 157 and the rest is technology.
That's right.
So basically I was coming up with ones, okay. So is this part of the, when you gave your overview on how we're using the capital reserve, correct?
Yep.
Walk me through the process. If we're asking for 322 and we're taking a .15 hit because we're off 100,000, is that what you had? We're only, in other words, if we're asking 322, how is the 100,000 affecting our budget?
Right, so there is, on the 5-year capital plan.
Right.
There are, if you add up 1819, it adds to 322,500.
Right,
We are looking to offset 222,500 with capital reserve funds.
but we're taking a
The
$100,000
other
hit, which is a
100 is-
.15 to our budget.
In our budget right now, that's
Okay.
right. 0.15 of the 2.59 is that 100,000 tied to these projects.
So if we go to the capital reserve and we have $322,000 worth of expenditures, and we're asking to be reimbursed 222.
Yes.
We're adjusting our budget to the downside of 100,000.
We are, well, yeah, I mean, we are.
We're taking a
in-
hit in this budget for 100,000.
We're
Yes.
embedding 100,000. The idea being is that our argument is that a lot of the things on our 5-year capital plan really should be part of the operating expenses if we want the capital reserve to really be a reserve account for emergencies. These are not emergency expenses, and they're not
They're
big.
non-reoccurring capital expenditures, except when we go to the capital reserve, technically, we've gone in the past for things that, we try and put on the radar, but sometimes there are larger projects that we just can't absorb in our operational budget.
Right.
So, going back to the actual process, is that if we were to approve this, let's say that this budget went through the way that it is, we're basically reducing our capital reserve draw by 100,000.
Yes.
So with that being said, are we using the same formula that came about in the last administration, that if this budget is approved through the council and the voters, that money is drawn on without having to go to council and board of finance? Have we gone that far yet?
So the 222 would be, the way this budget is, that's correct. So in the revenue account, you'll see on page 71, the last line in there is capital reserve of 222,500.
Right.
So if this budget would be adopted by the referendum in May,
Right.
then that would give the board kind of the authority, and the town council adopts this budget and at their budget adoption, the 222 out of the capital reserve. That's correct.
As well as the Board of Finance.
Well,
That's correct.
right, but for a procedural, to go on the record, I'd like to make sure that the new, all members seated in various bodies are aware of that. That's a change.
Absolutely.
That came over through a memo to the Operations Committee by the previous finance director.
Correct.
So, surprise isn't good in budget season.
Agreed.
So I think that should be discussed.
We will
But-
certainly make that
But
clarification.
also, I see where you're going with trying to, I'm not sure I'm in favor of adding a $100,000 hit to this budget on something that maybe isn't the year to do it. So, I realize that capital is kind of the first thing out there because we try and protect instruction and things like that, but I just wanted to walk through the formula, how that works. So
Right, I
thank
think
you.
our concern is the capital reserve is built through year-end balance appropriations. As if we're drawing more than we're adding,
Then maybe we don't draw as much.
well, while I don't disagree with you on that, I think the concern is these projects, a lot of them, what we're funding through traditionally capital reserve are now, almost like that Chromebook refresh. Some of the projects that Kevin's talking about, making sure our playgrounds are up to code or refreshed, we're looking at that just like electricity, that it's something we have to fund every year. We can't only do it kind of in feast or famine mode, not fund it for 2 or 3 years and then fund it. That doesn't create that cycle. And so we're trying to get kind of in this pattern, as Mr. Minret pointed out with some of the pumps. Right now, we're waiting for pumps to fail, and it's really not cost effective. So that failure at Northville of that heat pump happened, it never happens in July. It happens during a cold snap where we have classrooms that aren't being heated. So now we have to rush order parts, we have to pay overtime on the weekends to bring people in, we have to move students out of the classroom. If we move to a cycle of, we're gonna replace 1 or 2 of those pumps every year, we're gonna add wood chips to our to our playgrounds every year, we're gonna put $1,000 into upgrades for equipment, we don't have to wait in like 10 years until the playground completely rots and then have to spend $50,000 out of the capital reserve. We want it to be kind of a slow grind where we keep schools open and we don't have to scramble. It doesn't mean that will never happen, but it means that we're gonna be better positioned for when it does and hopefully mitigate the damage before it's midnight and a pump doesn't start and now it's, calling in people and paying overtime and shipping and all, rush shipping a 500-pound piece of equipment is expensive. So
I
those are the
understand
kind
that
of
you don't,
structures.
in all fairness, that can happen with anything. We've had
Absolutely can.
surprises along the
It will
way.
not prevent it. That's correct.
So, we're not going to be able to stop the surprise.
Absolutely.
We
Agreed.
can plan as much as we can, but we also should be, just my opinion, when we're looking at capital, for especially the facilities piece, it should be on a safety component first, and then working the tier down. This is gonna be a tough budget year, and that's an automatic $100,000 hit to the board, identifiable in one line item,
Yes, it is.
so.
Anything, JT?
David, maybe you can answer this question for me. If I'm understanding correctly then, just to kind of clarify, on page 71 where we talk about the $222,000, right, coming from capital reserve, and the layers behind going from, superintendent's budget, board-approved budget, town council, board of finance.
I'll do my best.
Okay, how, would that automatically trigger that would come from, if it's approved through those bodies?
Then we're at liberty to spend the
That's what
money
I
on the
said.
capital
Okay,
projects.
right, so just clarify
It-
that.
it-
Because we usually have to
okay,
ask
this
directly.
li- Well,
but if
this
it's
line
embedded-
was added for several reasons. One, to expedite the projects, but I think more importantly, it's right there in the budget, okay, for the public to see. This is how much we plan to draw and spend from capital reserve. Whereas previously, throughout the year, we'd go through this process, and sometimes it would take a while to, get those expenditures approved, and it's hard to keep track of, quite frankly.
Right.
I mean, for our constituents.
Right.
So it's got a dual purpose here. dual purpose.
So I see, right.
Openness as well as
Transparent, right.
effectiveness.
Okay. No, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
Any other questions on capital? Very well then. And we'll go back to, I believe we've got technology up.
No.
A little bit of a dual role, sorry. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me to present the technology budget request for the 2018-19 school year this evening. I put up the mission statement for the school district. It's important to align technology with the mission of the school system. The technology department supports every department in the school district in various ways. We work closely with Ms. DeCorpo, Mr. Monrette, Mrs. Olson, Ms. Baldelli, Mr. Smith, Mr. Giovanni, and administration and staff at all schools to support each department in their technology needs. Technology has become a part of the classroom as important as textbooks in today's educational institutions. Students utilize technology in their daily lives without a second thought. The technology budget is based on what is needed to give staff and students devices and an infrastructure that is dependable and secure. This is just a quick snapshot of what the technology department does overall in the course of, this is just the half year, this is a current slide. So we support over 6,200 devices. To date, we've had 3,100 help desk tickets that have been closed, and we support 8 locations, including central office, the MAX, and the facilities building, the barn. Our priorities for this year are to continue to provide technological support to curriculum and facilities. The technology department works closely with all the stakeholders to support district and educational initiatives. Throughout all of the earlier presentations, curriculum and supports for each department are a common theme. Embedded in the supports piece is technology in a variety of ways. This is a dynamic slide. It changes on a daily basis. It shows you the type of devices that we support, the infrastructure that we support, and what's needed to keep the school district running on a daily basis. It's important to note that we did refresh a lot of the network infrastructure and the server infrastructure about 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago. There was a large investment in capital to bring the infrastructure up to where we needed it to be. When email is down or smart boards don't work, we're frequently told that we can't do our work. What we've been able to do this year is expand the parent portal, so now K-12 schools throughout the district have a portal for parents to communicate. The high school, actually, the students are using the portal to communicate with teachers. That's new this year. We also expanded the student information system. This spring, students at the high school will be able to do course requests online. So we're hoping to streamline that and make it easier for students and teachers and staff. We had an exciting program that we started with Mr. Longo, collaborated with Ms. DeCorpo, and it's Skype a Scientist at the middle school. So we purchased the equipment so that they can actually Skype different scientists throughout the higher education and work with them. And they're very excited with the science department there. It's kind of it's a trial, and we'll see how it goes with everyone, but already the other science teachers want this in their classroom. What's important to note is with the addition of the Chromebooks, we're migrating from a wired environment to a wireless environment, which we're going to have to invest in the wireless infrastructure that we have in the district to support the amount of Chromebooks that we have. Something that was a great collaboration with the facilities is we worked with them to install and configure the security and the wireless coverage on the turf fields. That was a very interesting, it was a good project, and I believe we expanded it to the observatory as well. We helped with a security camera in an area that were having trouble at really no cost, so that was a good project.
As Mr. Corporal mentioned in her presentation, there are unfunded mandates that have direct costs to us. The Student Data Privacy Act was first done in October of 2016, and it had to be revised and it was placed on hold. But as of July 1st, we have to have contracts with every vendor that has student identifiable information. And those contracts have to be looked at by the lawyers. The state is trying to come up with a way to help support us, but right now, most of it is falling on Mr. Corporal and myself. So we're working pretty hard to make sure that we can comply with that act. And the new one that we just had handed to us is the Website Accessibility ADA Act. We've been working closely with our website provider. It's an interesting act because the website providers are saying it's all on you, and we're saying we can't possibly do all of this, and some of it is in your coding. So we're going back and forth. This took place, it's already in place January 1st, but we're still doing a lot of work on it. You will see changes to the documents on the website, which mean we have to rescan all those documents in a format that allows them to be searchable on the web. So that's going to be hours and hours of work for several secretaries in many departments and the schools. One of my techs at one of the elementary schools decided that there would be a better way to work with the Chromebooks that are old. So what she's doing is taking apart every piece of a Chromebook and putting them more or less like in bins to reuse with other Chromebooks. So we have a refurbished program. It's pretty successful, and they actually mark where the original Chromebooks came from, and then we'll return them back to the school to be put back into that inventory. You might send 6 Chromebooks back over, and you might get 2 back, but that's 2 more than we had. So it's pretty successful, and the techs are actually really excited about this program. And just a couple of pictures of the students in the classroom using the technology. We've started to allow students to collaborate with each other in class settings, solitary, or like on the left, you have 2 young students working on a smartboard on a project together. All of that takes a lot of infrastructure behind the scenes for the students to be able to do this. It needs to be reliable, and we have to continue to invest in this for our district. The budget lines. So page 39, my budget lives in 3 areas. So this is my DOI area. I'm in DOGA, and I have a little bit of capital as well. So for DOI, there is now less training required with Microsoft, which we went to 2 years ago, and most people in the district are comfortable, and the majority of new hires are already familiar with Microsoft. So there is an additional need for student information training. That's as a result of the components that we've added. Secretaries need to know what to do with the requests. We had to go through training with the add-on of the course requests. But I think balancing everything, I'm able to reduce this line by almost $4,000, and I feel comfortable that we'll still be able to provide all the training needed. The vendor support list, the increase in this request is to build capacity throughout the district as the migration from a wired infrastructure to a wireless infrastructure continues. The infrastructure at SNIS, which is our hub, our main one, needs to be updated continually, and we need to add components to the existing devices that we have in order to support the wireless devices that exist at the schools. So this is more on the back end. It's the part that people don't really see. It's our wireless controller, our internet connections. It's those kinds of things that as we add more devices and become more dependent on technology, we need to upgrade, we need to add components, and many times the backside of this, the fiber, we need to have vendors come in and take care of this for us. Additionally, at each building, those locations, they're what we call backbone in technology, also needs to be upgraded so it talks correctly to the main hub. So it's a large process and it's interconnected. You can't just upgrade one piece and not upgrade the rest. They don't talk well. In this line, I took a cut from the budget cuts at the end of the year in the 17-18. So I've added back what I needed, and then it's another $4,500, I believe, that I'm putting as an addition for this year in the budget. This line I felt that I was able to reduce with especially with the phone contracts that Mr. Giovanni, sorry, was able to work out. I don't feel that we're going to have as many repairs and that most of them will be covered under the contract, but not all. When there's issues with the handsets, we do have to pay for them and the other equipment that you can see up on the slide. So. Oop. Nope, I missed it. There we go. So the instructional equipment line and supplies, this line, it fulfills a multitude of needs. The easy one to start with is toner. This is district-wide, except for the high school. They do purchase their own. So this covers all the toner used in the rest of the buildings. This also covers the data center battery backups. Those are not just batteries as you think, and they're not just the small battery backups that you might have at your house. They're actually quite large battery backups that keep the voltages the same whenever there's a change in the building. 3 of them are located here because this is the main hub. So they're very important. But along with that, the turf field project, that had to come out of this line. We didn't know that was going to come up, and it needed to be completed, and we needed to buy components to add to our network so that it would work with the third-party network that we have out there. Additionally, every time we upgrade the cameras or add cameras, new switches and new network equipment have to be installed to run those cameras. So as Mr. Munrat upgrades the camera systems at the schools, it has an impact directly on our budget, and this is the line that we take that from. Some of the schools, as you've heard in the presentations, are implementing maker spaces, and we work with the teachers involved with that and with Mrs. DeCorpo. They look for things such as tablets where students can listen to books, tablets that they can work on in a small, quiet area, different headsets that they might need. Also with testing, there are adjustments that are made to testing. We just found out for the last links we need special headsets for that, so we had to do a bulk purchase. So those kind of things come out of this instructional equipment budget. If you go to 69, page 69, that's my DOGA budget. The majority of this budget is for central office or district-wide, and the largest line in this is our purchase services, which is our licensing. With the increase in the technology, our licenses go up. So when we expand the wireless, we have to pay for more licenses, not only on the controller, which is the piece that runs everything, but also on the access points, you pay for a license on each one of them as well. Redeker, that's the student information system. As we've increased its capacity, we have to pay for the new components that we've added, so that increases. Adobe increases yearly, and it is used at the high school in several of the programs. Google licenses, the renewal, it's a 3-year license. Many of our Chromebooks are 5 to 6 years old, so we have to continually license those Chromebooks in order for them to work with the infrastructure that we have in place. The smart boards, the software that runs them, that has to be purchased every year. Brand new licenses to upgrade. That also includes all the back end that we need for the smart boards to bring them up and make them current. 2 years ago, CEN decided that they would not be able to fund freely our internet connections. So we've had to start budgeting for the connection to the state that allows us to connect to the internet in the school system. And website licensing, these are just some of the bigger pieces of that licensing. Website licensing is a yearly cost, and we're looking to change our website to find something that will be a little bit more user-friendly and easier for parents. Also, antivirus is extremely important, and this world's becoming more complex in technology, and we need to make sure that we invest in the software that will keep the district, students, and our devices safe. So this line, the non-instructional technology has gone up. A lot of that is simply the cost of the devices that we have to use now. Presenter equipment, that's district-wide. We have a laptop that if someone comes in and doesn't have it or won't work with our system, we can go out and we can use that. Any presenter equipment, even the remotes. Also, the Raptor badge supply, that's for the visitors in the schools, and the elementaries and Sarah Noble go through quite a few of the badges, so that's a constant replacement piece. The capital projects, it's a 5-year plan. It is spelled out on page 70, and we're doing, this coming year, we have to replace the Project Lead the Way computers. That's on a required cycle. So what we do with those computers is move them to a computer lab at the middle school, and then we take those computers and we replace the old student computers in the classroom. So they're constantly used until we've replaced the computers that we can no longer use. The smart board refreshment cycle is done on age. For the elementaries really have the oldest style smart boards, and so before they go, and we already know the ones that are giving us trouble, we set them up to be installed usually over the summer, but during the school year, as they fail, we also will replace. The Chromebook refresh cycle has been part of this for 3 years now, I believe. The network refresh cycle was, we were going to do the servers this year. However, we had the channel 194 issue where it stopped working, so we had to purchase that instead. So we did a flop on what we're going to spend in the capital, and that was approved through operations and the board. I don't have the day of the meeting, but I believe it was December. And any questions?
Thank you. All right, any general questions on the overview?
Can we go through some of the slides? Or is
Right.
that, the slides are a little bit different? Is it? Just on the last slide that you just had up, the capital projects at 322, your portion of that, the technology piece is 165.
That's right.
You might want to put that in there, because that's a piece, I mean, you're not asking for 322, your piece
Correct.
is 165.
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify.
I would ask for 322.
Well, listen,
He
I'm
will
just
not
here
give it
to
to me.
correct the number.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wendy? Not Wendy, I'm sorry, Angie.
I have several questions. On the first time we talked about the work with facilities to install and configure security and wireless coverage on the turf fields, I thought you said that that was no cost to us,
That's right.
but then you talked about it back in the supplies and instructional equipment and said that that was one of the drivers of that increase.
No, it's not, there were costs associated with that. We did not think there were going to be costs, but when you connect a third party, so we're using completely different network equipment that out on the field, because what we currently have would not put the wireless out there, then they couldn't connect the cameras. But then we needed to buy equipment that would talk between our current system and their system. So that's where that came in. We didn't buy any of the security cameras or any of that, but we needed to work with the provider and Mr. Munret's department to make sure that we could connect their different names, systems, but
Okay, I get it.
Yep.
And this may be a stupid question, but why did we need wireless on the field?
you can't do the security cameras without them. There's no electricity going out, so we already had to have.
So it's
And-
better to have the security cameras wireless as opposed to hardwire?
If,
It
so,
was the only option.
That's
Because in
right.
order to make them hardwired, the conduit that was installed under the field wasn't wide enough to run wiring. So in order for, if we wanted to run wired cameras, we would have had to dig up the field.
Okay, they probably wouldn't have appreciated that.
no, that was part of the discussion, though. We tried every way, we tried to go through the observatory.
Yeah.
I mean, we did everything we could, and there was no way.
No, I just wanted
Yep,
to ask.
yep.
And then you talk about the Microsoft training. Where do we use Microsoft? I thought we were Google.
Oh, well, everything is Microsoft, like what the secretaries use. But when we did 2 years ago, we switched over to the email. From, we were group-wise, we went to Exchange. We went from Novell over to Windows, and we needed to have sessions to teach all staff, or at least anyone that wasn't familiar with Microsoft, on how to navigate through their daily needs.
Okay. I just want to say I'm all in favor of changing that website.
Oh, and the business department as well. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
That's okay. I'm all in favor of changing the website because we definitely need that upgraded.
The website was an emergency, just so you know. The company that hosted us told us with less than 2 months to go, they were leaving, and they went to Texas, and they were not going to do Connecticut. So we found someone that was only slightly higher, because website companies are really high.
Right.
But we have 2 more years left on the contract, but to start, we have to like plan now and start rolling out in pieces.
So I'm all in favor.
We're hoping.
And then just my last question, do we not have a donor again for Project Lead the Way computer refresh?
They don't do the computer refresh, so they buy the other pieces, the parts. Do you want to speak to it?
Just some large-scale equipment.
Right.
That we wouldn't purchase in our budget.
We've been purchasing as long as I've been here, in fact, the first year it surprised me because I didn't know we had to do that. And I don't think I budgeted correctly for it. So that donor does, like the 3D printer, there's
Computers,
equipment.
computers, okay.
So from the beginning, it was,
Okay,
they weren't
I-
gonna supplant the program. So
Right,
they
right,
buy
right.
the equipment that we
Okay.
normally buy.
And the supplies they need, I believe, as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Wendy,
Um,
Joe, and JT.
We're kind of, can we look at, I guess, page 70, because that's part of it.
It's my favorite page.
Yeah, well, okay, so the Chromebook refresh, how many Chromebooks is that?
355.
355, and the technology component is embedded in 3 portions of this. Now, we heard the high school the other evening talk about Chromebooks. This has nothing to do with that, this is on your own, correct?
This is refreshing what's already in place.
Correct.
Yes.
So, in May, we had an overview of what we have in district. And so, what I see here is 1,287 desktops, 3 smart tables, 251 smart boards, 580 office and classroom phones, and 1,900 Chromebooks.
It's actually 2185 to be current
Great,
now.
okay. So it's 2185, and you're asking for a refresh to, are you replacing any of these, or are these just addition?
No, we're replacing. So many of these devices
Right.
were actually, trying to think of the name of they were the IBM netbooks, netbooks, I think they were. Lenovo netbooks that were purchased, so I've been here almost 5, so 6 years ago. Those netbooks are not laptops, and they're not Chromebooks, and they never did what they were supposed to do.
So these
So we-
Chromebooks are to replace those?
We flipped those into Chromebooks.
Right, okay.
And yes, those need to be replaced now.
And the lifespan on those? How long have we
On the
had
new
them?
Chromebooks?
On the ones that we're replacing?
Oh, the lifespan is 3 years
Okay.
per the device
Okay.
manufacturers, and these are 5 to 6 years old. Typically, school systems get at least 5 years out of a Chromebook.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Joe?
Do I understand correctly with Chromebooks then, that there is in your capital request here, there is no net increase in the number of Chromebooks you're purchasing?
That's correct.
How many students we have in the district?
3998 roughly.
So with 2185 Chromebooks plus the other 136 from Mr. Shagreau, we're running 60% of the students?
I think that's fair.
I mean, that's my
Yeah,
quick
ballpark,
math. I
yeah.
didn't say-
Yeah, I think
Approximately.
that's. yeah.
I do have a breakdown per school if you need. I forgot to put it on the
That would be
slide.
great.
I apologize. I can give it to you, or we can send it.
That would be
You
great.
can send it, that's.
Okay.
Does that include the licensing costs for those
No, no,
335?
That's back in DOGA,
Doga,
right, in the licensing.
So it would be 80,000 plus what would be the licensing
Right.
cost for those 355 Chromebooks?
That's correct.
What would that cost?
Oh, so they're $30 a license
For 3 years,
times,
right?
for 3 years, times 355.
I mean, it's about 10, now you get a break when you buy the $30 for 3 years, but it's about $10 a year per Chromebook, you know, to kind of keep in your head, to license. And without the license, you can't connect to it.
I'm gonna backtrack. Now, as per Mr. Shagreau, we were buying 136 of them at 38,000, and yet the licensing cost is 14,000.
So the licensing, I thought, what page are you looking at the licensing? It's just
I
like-
wrote it
Well,
on
no,
the
that-
cover.
That's
wrote
what the
it too.
information,
Yeah.
but what I'm understanding is the license is for more than 1 year, correct?
Correct.
It's for 3 years.
Okay.
Are you sure?
No,
You want to-
it doesn't make sense between the high school cost.
Yeah, no, help
for
me
the
like understand what, so you
All
said
right,
it's
Mr.
136.
Shagreau had 136 Chromebooks
Okay,
for 38,502. plus his licensing cost of $14,085 for a total of $53,307. So the relationship to license costs, Chromebook at the high school are exponentially more expensive than your division. Or am I missing something? 136 Chromebooks times $30, not getting 14,000.
Right, so that's what I was gonna ask, just
Right.
to do that
Is that all
math.
the computers in the school? Like, are those coming up
I
too,
will-
right?
No, we asked for
So
the
the
license.
Chromebook licensing on that should equal
Excuse me.
4080. So I was just gonna ask, what line you getting the 14,000, and help me understand.
I'll be honest, I wrote it on the cover, I got it directly in Mr. Chagrew's presentation.
Yes.
There he is.
Mr. Shagru, can you shed some insight?
The figure I gave of 14805 was not just licenses. The figure I gave was for object code 53300, which includes online practice, there was additional license, there's professional development in there. So it wasn't just the licenses under that. The $14,000 includes under object code 53300.
Okay, that's where, somehow we got a total cost of $53,000 between Chromebooks
Right,
and license, but that
so-
incorporates a lot of your
When I
licenses.
broke it down under object code. So 53300 takes care of the licenses, and in that object code are other items. And then I also broke it down by, 57,340 was where the Chromebook, the actual hardware is. Okay?
All right.
So, good question, but the 53,300 is not just, the figure I gave you is not solely for the licenses. There's other items in that purchase service line.
That clears it up, thank you. I will say one other thing while I still have the floor. Go ahead. Is that any time I hear the word turf, my heart rate increases. Especially with digging and shoveling around it. For a $3.2 million project, whatever we spend to secure that is worth it. And if we need something above and beyond that, you make sure that we know, and I will make sure those who served on that committee know about it, to protect that significant investment. Thank you.
JT?
Oh, thanks. Let's see, Roberta, just a question. You had me at toner.
It gets me too.
I know. So on page 7 of your, on page 7 of the presentations here, so you said toner. Now, I'm curious, I've got to think this is a bargain. Is that toner for the district, or is it that?
It's, except for the high school and for central offices purchase their own. That was in place before I came, and we've just
Okay.
not changed it, but it's for all the rest of the printers in the district, yes.
Okay, wow, all right, and then I'm just curious on the breakdown there, because this 611 account has a number of other things in there. I'm just curious maybe what that line is, and, moving forward, is that something that we move to the buildings?
Well, we've discussed that actually. It runs about 20,000,
Okay,
give or take, depending
Okay.
on the needs of the schools. And that was a conversation that we had.
okay, but then the high school, you said, they're 611.
They
it's
already
their
purchased their
toner.
own, so that's for
Okay,
K-8.
I see, okay, thank you.
Anybody else on technology or capital while we're there? Angie?
I just want to clarify something. The 2185 Chromebooks, and you said we had those netbooks, or I think that's what you called them before we got here. Does that 2185 include those netbooks, or those netbooks, okay. so it does.
When we replace, if I have the money to replace the Chromebooks, those are targeted immediately to come out.
And
They're
how-
definitely the oldest in the district,
Do you
and
know right off the top of your head how many we have of those?
the netbooks, I don't. I'm gonna say about 100.
Okay.
Many have gone to the refurbishing already.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think, yeah.
Throw in one piece about the Chromebooks, like Mr. Shagoo pointed out, that line in the high school does have other stuff, and not just the Chromebook licenses. So when the schools
In the
submitted...
$14,000 line?
Correct.
Okay.
So when the schools submitted their budgets for Chromebooks and Chromebook licenses, some had used differing rates, so what we had gone back through and adjusted all of them, so the presented budget book that you have in front of you, there's a Chromebook that appears there, it's using the standard pricing of $250 across the district. The license is using a standard 30 across the district. And if there's a Chromebook cart, it's using a standard $900 per cart. That's across the district.
Yeah, the licenses, again, they're good for 3 years, have I got this correct? Okay, well, that's important to know.
And anywhere you see those associated pieces of the Chromebook license itself, or the Chromebook cart, those are the standard costs used. They don't differ from location to location.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could just add to, if there's a Chromebook before 3 years that no longer works, we can use that license on the Chromebook that comes in to replace for whatever remaining time there is on the license. So that's tracked through our office.
Thank you. Any other questions on the capital or technology? Okay, moving on to Department of General Administration itself. Okay. Going to start on page 67.
Thank you.
So there's a couple pieces, I didn't print out new slides because for the most part you have all of these slides. I figured we just highlight them again because now we'll speak to them directly in a way that we didn't on the first night. 250,000 in the insurance line. Remember of that, that's the internal service fund offset that was embedded into this year's budget. Again, these are slides from night one. Just a reminder that the increase of healthcare, even with the high deductible, is 50% of that budget increase. Just about 800,000 of the 2.59% or 1.6 million is in that, and that is with mitigating the employees' healthcare plan. This is the thing that we work the hardest on. For those of you that are in negotiations, you know this is the bulk of the time that we spend in negotiations is insurance. We spoke about the capital reserve piece already. That shows up here as well. The piece that's not in, I'll get to in a second, collective bargaining, again, same slide from the first night. Our salary accounts increase, the increase of that account is 0.15% of that 2.59. And that is due in large part to the staffing reductions that are in this proposed budget. These lines did not change. This is the same. However, we've added this slide. This slide is the information that I shared with the board recently. KERMA is our liability and property insurance coverage as well as workers' comp. And the information that we received after this budget book was prepared. This was last Thursday, I believe, we were given the notification that that account can be reduced in the total of approximately $123,852. It's not that approximate, it's pretty specific, actually. And this is the breakdown of where those lines appear in the budget and those specific lines. And it's normal for these adjustments to happen. We met back in October. They gave us projections in October. We used those October projections to build the budget. As the year goes on and as they get actuals, and in some cases, what drove some of this were long-term disability claims that we've settled. Those have come off our liability sheets, and that gets adjusted based on current information, and that's where this number comes from. So the positive is that I would recommend that tomorrow night, when you make motions to change this budget, that you absorb or you can use this fund however you desire, but that the numbers in here don't reflect that because this came after our budget was prepared and presented. So I just want to be clear and transparent on that. And again, the page numbers and lines where these appear show up. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to also add that the memo from KERMA came to us as well as the town as well. So the town should be having corresponding the same % savings in each of those lines in their budget. This is not specific to just the Board of Ed.
And then, again, we've addressed revenue a little bit tonight, but that shows up here. And this captures kind of the questions that you mentioned before. And then here's that summary. Most of DOGA gets captured in other conversations, but we're at, and again, the large driver there is insurance, but certainly we can answer specific questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions on the, we'll go with up here first. This is when we say that's great news, I think, but,
I took it down, but I'll be happy to put it back up all you want.
okay, let's, well, let's start on 66 and see if we have any questions there.
Can I ask a quick question, Josh?
Yeah.
Removing the 123,852 reduces our budget from 2.59 to what?
To 2.38 is what I'm gonna say off the top of my head, is what I believe it is, but I'm,
Okay.
it's in the approximately 2.38 would be the total increase.
And page 67. Still over there, Bill? There you go. Okay. 68. And again, on this page, I think that's where we can take note. 52,900. What was the other one? 55?
200.
200, which is,
3 up from the bottom,
Wait a second.
there you go.
that line can be reduced by
Right.
28,965.
I have a question.
Which one?
3 up, 2 up from the bottom. Property and liability, 308,004 is what is budgeted for next year. And that one can be reduced per the Kerma report by 28,965. The others is in the last line of the top section, other employee benefits. Budgeted amount, 628,534, and that's the line that could be reduced by $94,885.
I have to change on the MOC.
Okay.
2.59 as presented goes to a 2.39% increase. with those-
2.39?
With those, correct, with those two
Yeah.
lines adjusted.
Okay, here it is. I'm sorry, Josh, the 628,534 could be reduced by what?
That's the one at the bottom. Oh, yeah, sorry, you didn't give me dollar amount. 628,534 can be reduced by 94,885.
Thank you.
JT and Wendy?
We're on page 68?
Yep.
We are?
Yep. Very last line there, Josh. The turnover savings.
Yes.
So last year, we're looking to kind of extend that same turnover savings that we budgeted this year, the current year, to next year,
Yes.
right? I'm just curious where we stand, you know, with all the magic of Munis, where do we stand with that turnover savings now? Are we above or below that
So,
right now?
so I would say we're above it, and if you ask how much we're above it, I would tell you
To the
it
good.
depends a little bit. Yes, we're to the
Okay.
good.
Okay.
How much above that gets into a little bit of, we have unfilled positions, do we expect to fill them, not fill them? You know, I think, I'm not overly comfortable with keeping that the same. Ms. Baldelli and I look at the kind of age of our staff,
The
retirements,
275?
the 275.
Okay.
And as we reduce our staff, as we have the last few years, as you have unemployment at 3.9%, as more areas become shortage areas, you know, it used to be if a teacher retired, you could pretty much guarantee you'd get savings if you hired a teacher at a lower rate. Now what's happening is the teachers that are retiring, in many cases, are in shortage areas, and the teachers we're replacing them with don't show the same amount of savings. So, you know, in a perfect world, I'd love to dial that back to 250, which is
And that's
what
where
we
we were last
recommended
year,
last
but
year.
we're right.
Then due to those adjustments, we dialed that up. I think that, again, we've made that. It's the same conversation we have about special ed. Where's the risk that we want to take? What are we comfortable with? And what's the impact to students and programs?
Right.
This risk, I feel comfortable. We've met our number every year. We've exceeded the 275 that we built into this number. I'm confident that we're going to hold true to that. We'll talk a little bit about operations in February. We're tracking it pretty clearly now. This budget book is all built on actuals. We know when someone leaves and someone's hired, so I think we're comfortable with that.
Okay.
But yes, that keeps it flat.
To that point then, so with Munis, just to play that out, if we have an unfilled position, are we extrapolating that then for the whole school year as if it's going to be unfilled for the year?
So in the budget position statement that we present at operations and then to the full board,
Right.
that if someone leaves, that money is unencumbered and put into that, and that's why the certified staff line tends to tick up and down.
Right.
And when you ask us who's in that, we can tell you which positions are currently unfilled, and then as they're filled, that number is readjusted because those funds are encumbered.
Okay, so that could be a swing right there, $30,000-$40,000 if you have, let's say, you're budgeting about $60,000 and change, right, for middle of the road, right? And then halfway through the year you fill that, then there's a $30,000
That's correct.
swing in that account.
Yes.
It's a volatile account.
Yeah, so, but we can pin it, I mean, we are pinning it down, but at the same time, okay.
We pin it down, we monitor it, we look at actuals, we look at,
Yep.
like, and it's, I feel like the stock exchange, past performance isn't necessarily an indicator of future returns.
Right.
That being said, we are pretty comfortable that this number, we're still in that comfort zone.
Okay.
Maybe getting a little more of the yellow than green, but we're okay.
Thanks for the explanation.
Wendy?
On the legal, I'm pleased, obviously, that there's a reduction in the retainer line. Is that because our negotiations is less aggressive? We're dealing with 2 bargaining units versus what we had last year that was a little bit more, or is that just kind of a guesstimate? Where are we getting that number from?
You are exactly correct.
Okay.
Actually, I have a page on 60, question on 68. And it's under Board of Education, 53,200, purchasing services, other professional,
Yes.
and the amount of $27,350. What does that include? Is that our?
That's my salary,
I
Dave.
was-
You're worth every penny.
That's Brian's bonus.
What page are you on, David?
68.
Okay, thank you.
Board of Ed.
Oh.
Board of Ed,
I
second
never-
line down.
So I would say the bulk of that, if you kind of tick back to the 16-17 budget, you see the 773.
Right.
And then you see it jump to 27.
Mhm.
That's the 20,000 we budgeted for the
The
strategic
strategic
plan.
plan.
Okay, that's where it is.
Are the cave dues in there or no?
That's a
No.
low down.
Cave, I believe, is in the, no. I
And
think
it's,
we're in
is
the
it
Board
still
of
around 16 or
Ed.
17,000?
Yes. It's,
Okay.
It's an 810 account,
Okay.
right, so dues.
Is that fine?
And the Board of Ed.
Dues and fees.
Dues and fees.
Yep.
Board of Ed. Put in Board of Ed.
Yes,
that's okay.
sorry, yes, thank you.
Well,
Thank you for explaining. I appreciate you helping me find
That's the only
that.
thing I knew.
That's it, that's good. Yes, I'm like, that line's not enough, but yes, it's, I'm looking at that, yes.
So the 20,000 for the strategic.
Is in there.
Okay, any other questions on page 68? On page 69? Okay. All right. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's any public that would like to be heard. Any public comment? Anybody? Come on, there's some of you out there. Okay. Okay, at this time, I need a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the performance, future employment, and salary of the district courier, accounting manager, administrative assistant to the superintendent, human resources director, lab assistant, systems analyst, technology director, network administrator, assistant facilities director, data specialist, assistant superintendent, director of fiscal services and operations, and food services director, and to invite into such session Superintendent Mr. Smith.
So moved.
Point of clarification?
Yes.
Did you ask for executive session on that? I missed that first piece.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
Second, any discussion? Those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
Now you're on 3 minutes. Yeah. I told someone at town council where they could find you last night. I told someone at Board of Finance where they could find you last night.
Finance.